Okay, I think the attendees have come in, so I think we can begin. Good morning, everybody. This is Amy Hutzel, the new executive officer at the State Coastal Conservancy. And before we begin the meeting, I want to make some logistical announcements. The board members, the oversight members, Ann White, our board clerk, Amy Roach, general counsel, our IT staff, and I are logged into Zoom as panelists. And everyone else attending the meeting, including other Conservancy staff, our grant applicants, and members of the public, are logged in as attendees. A live transcript of the meeting is available in English by clicking live transcript at the bottom of the Zoom screen. That's new for us. And new to this meeting, a live Spanish interpretation is also available. Our Spanish interpreters are David Mendoza and Ana Gallo, who are also panelists. And to participate in Spanish, you click the interpretation icon, which is also located at the bottom of the Zoom screen. So I'm hoping either David or Ana can repeat that information about the Spanish translation in Spanish, but on our English channel. So I'm going to give a second. I'm not sure if we can make that happen. But David, are you able to move over to the English channel and explain how to click on the interpretation button in Spanish? Okay, well, I don't know that we're going to be able to make that happen, but there is an interpretation button at the bottom of the screen. And if you want to watch and participate in this meeting in Spanish, please click on that button. And now I'd like to share a video that provides instructions for participating in this public board meeting. Andrew, can you show the introductory video?
Welcome to the board meeting of the California State Coastal Conservancy. Due to COVID-19, this meeting will be conducted over Zoom teleconference pursuant to the provisions of Governor's Executive Order N-2920. The Chair will call upon board members, presenters, staff, and other speakers by name and ask that they speak clearly and state their names before giving comments. If you do not wish to state your name, you are not required to do so. The Conservancy will take public comments on each agenda item prior to taking action on or completing discussion of that item. The Conservancy will take public comments on matters that do not relate to a specific agenda item during public comments on non-agenda items. If you wish to comment on a consent calendar item, please raise your hand when the Chair announces the consent calendar. Before, during, or after public comment on the consent calendar, the Chair may move items from the consent calendar to the regular calendar for a full hearing at either the same meeting or a later meeting. In order to make a public comment at the appropriate times in the agenda, please raise your hand using the Raise Hand option on Zoom or dialing *9 from a phone. Then wait to be called upon to speak. If you are attending by phone, you will be unmuted. If you are attending on Zoom, when it is your turn to speak, you will be moved into the participant panel so that you can appear on camera. You may see a blue circle on your screen as you are moved from attendee to participant. Once you are a participant, if you wish to appear on camera, you must turn your camera on. At the end of your comment, you will be moved back to attendee. Phone participants will be re-muted. Public comments will be limited to a maximum of 2 minutes each. Public comments on non-agenda items will be limited to 30 minutes total. This may be adjusted by the Chair. If you sent us a public comment by email before 5 p.m. Friday, it will be entered into the record and shared with the Conservancy members, but will not be read aloud. If you submitted a comment in advance of the meeting, you do not need to repeat it during the meeting, though you are welcome to do so. A roll call vote will be taken for all action items. The chat feature will be disabled for the duration of the meeting. Closed captioning is available in English. To view the live transcript, please follow the instructions on this slide. Spanish interpretation is available throughout the meeting. To participate in Spanish, please follow the instructions on this slide.
Great. Thank you, Andrew, for showing that. We will remind people about the instructions throughout the meeting. And just to note that this meeting's agenda has the action items at the top of the agenda, and public comment on non-agenda items is near the end of the board meeting. This was done to ensure that we have a quorum for the action items. We do ask that members of the public continue to have patience with us during these crazy pandemic times. If you need assistance during the meeting, please email public comments, that's all one word, at scc.ca.gov. And now, Anne, could you please call the roll?
Yes. Thank you, Amy. Good morning, Chair Bosco, Conservancy Board. Can I have all board members unmute themselves, please? And I will be calling the roll. Ms. Nodoff,
Present.
Ms. Lachlan,
And
Mr. Cash,
here.
Ms. Miller, Mr. Aliotto,
Here.
Ms. Gutierrez Grounage, and Chair Bosco.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Great, thank you, Anne. So Doug, we're ready to go.
Okay, thank you, Amy and Ann. And before we get started, I'd like to wish all of you a very happy holiday season. Hopefully it'll be peaceful and rewarding for you and your families. I also would very much like to announce that we have a new executive officer. Amy is not new to the Conservancy, obviously, having been a major part of our family for a long time, but we're all thrilled that our board appointed her by unanimous vote, and the governor followed and officially approved her appointment. Amy, we wish you Godspeed in your work and are happy to have you with us in this capacity. I'd like to
Could I
introduce.
just add that Amy is the first woman to lead a coastal zone management agency in the state of California?
Well, good. Yeah, I couldn't be happier personally, Amy. Certainly Sam was wonderful to work with in every respect, but I expect a very seamless transition under your leadership. I'd also like to introduce the other members of our board. Annie Nodoff was appointed by the Senate. Marcy Gutierrez Grounds was appointed by the Assembly. Joseph Aliotto was appointed by the governor. Linda Lachlan is the Public Access Program Manager of the Coastal Commission, and therefore is sitting in on behalf of the chair of the commission. Brian Cash is representing the Resources Agency. And I think we have some, I know we have some of our oversight members here with us. Assemblyman Mark Stone is with us, Assemblyman Robert Rivas. I think this is your first meeting with us, if I'm not. Welcome, we're real happy to have you with us. I think that's it for the oversight members. I'd like to ask the oversight members if they would like to address the board. I know that Assemblyman Stone has just returned from the Glasgow conference, and certainly we'd be happy to hear any words that you might have about that. It's going to be a major issue, of course, for the Conservancy as we proceed.
Well, thank you. Just very briefly, one of the interesting things about these climate conferences, the oceans had never really been taken into account until California brought that issue to bear several years ago when we had the conference in San Francisco. And since then, oceans have been a key part of the conversation overall. I think if you read the news out of the conference, the agreements were rather disappointing, especially around coal and the steps that need to be taken. But for me, what was in a way heartening, although I'm not sure the timing is going to work out given the need to get below 1.5 degrees Celsius or keep the temperature rise in a very short period of time. But for the first time at these climate conferences, the financial industry was there, signaling to governments and to the private sector that financing for major projects, especially public sector type projects, are going to need to have a climate response within them in order to be adequately seen for financing. So I think that's good news. It's been a long time coming to get some of these sectors to the conference to be a part of the discussion around climate. So far, it's only been governments. But I'm not sure that that's a longer term perspective, I think. So the news is really mixed. It's always good to have the discussion, and especially for California to be in discussions with a number of the subnational jurisdictions, Scotland being one of them, and various other states and subnational jurisdictions that are taking the climate issues very, very seriously. So we're seeing ourselves as subnational jurisdictions as leading the way, because a lot of federal jurisdictions are mired in different types of politics, shall we say, and not really making the progress that we would all like to see. So it's the subnationals that we feel we're leading the way, and I think that's very appropriate. So we will see. I look forward to the next level of conferences, and hopefully we can continue to build on what we've done and pressure the national jurisdictions to make stronger commitments to reduction of carbon in our atmosphere.
Well, thank you very much. We're here to follow your lead. And the legislature's given us some financial ability to do that in a big way, I think. Assemblyman Rivas, would you like to say anything?
Yeah, sure. You know, I'm very excited to have had the opportunity to join you all, and look forward to you know, working with everybody and the engagement that you know, we will have, and always, you know, a pleasure to work with my friend Mr. Mark Stone. So it's great to be here, and look forward to the time to serve with you all.
Thank you. Good to have you with us. Did Senator Allen join us? Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
Oh.
I'm here. I'm en route to tour a landfill, actually.
Oh.
So I'll be taking this meeting from the car with my staffer here.
Okay. Well, we won't ask you to say any further unless you'd like to.
I'm looking forward to the discussion.
All right. Also, Kara Woodruff is here from Senator Laird's office. Kara, I'm sorry for skipping over you. I didn't mean to, but.
Oh, not at all. I'm here representing Senator Laird because he's not able to make it today. As I think most of you know, he represents the 17th Senate District, which is San Luis Obispo, Monterey, Santa Cruz counties, and part of Santa Clara County. He is the former Secretary of Resources under Governor Brown, very passionate about the coast, and very honored to be a member of the oversight group. And I'm certainly honored to be here on his behalf. And congratulations to the new executive officer. We're happy to support you in any way, and really happy about your appointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Kara. All
And
right.
Chair Bosco, I just wanted to point out Helen Walter from Senator Becker's office is in the attendees list. I'm hoping she could get moved over to the panelist too and introduced.
All right. Well, if that happens, we'll try to introduce her. Okay, as always, please, and any of the members of the board or our oversight members that want to make a motion, please physically raise your hand and I will attempt to find you. If you don't raise your hand, I may have you make the motion without you knowing it. So please act very quickly when the time comes for motions and seconds. All right, let's go ahead with the approval of the minutes of our September 23rd, 2021 meeting. Are there any requests that we add or change the minutes at all? Okay, if not, Annie, would you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Notoff,
Aye.
Ms. Laughlin,
Yes.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. The September minutes is approved.
Okay, we'll now go on to the consent items. These are items that either we have previously approved or are $250,000 or less. And the public is welcome to comment on those items now. If there's anyone that wants to speak on the consent calendar items, please raise your hand. All right, I don't see any hands. Chris, do we have any raised hands?
We have no raised hands.
Pardon?
We have no raised hands.
Okay. Are there any board members that want to remove any items from the consent calendar? Okay, if not, Annie, will you go ahead and call the roll on that item?
Do you wanted to take a motion in a second, sir?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Okay, Annie, do you want to
I
move?
move approval.
And Brian, do you want to second that? Good.
All
Okay,
right,
go ahead and call the roll.
sure. Ms. Notoff,
Aye.
Ms. Laughlin,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 3 is approved.
Okay. All right, we now have the Executive Officer Hiring Subcommittee report, which will probably be a very short report since we already have hired that person. But I will use the moment here to thank Annie and Brian for their good work in this regard. We know that you worked very hard on receiving applications and sorting through them and interviewing people. And we feel you came up with a great choice, and thank you on behalf of the whole board.
Well, thank you. I did want to just remind the board and the public that, you know, the Conservancy conducted a thorough and extensive national search for our executive officer, and we received over a dozen very highly qualified applications. We interviewed 5 people in person and had several finalists, and I feel very confident that we've hired the best person for the job. But it was really gratifying to see the extensive amount of interest from in the state, throughout the state of California, and nationally as well.
Great. All right, next we'll move on to the Executive Officer's report. Amy, would you like to go ahead and start with that? I'd also like to request that anyone that wants to speak on any of the items listed on our agenda for the Executive Officer's report to let us know now. And we'll take your comments, take them now. those comments should be limited to 2 minutes too. Chris, do we have anyone that wants to speak on this item?
We do not have any raised hands.
All right, go ahead, Amy, with your report.
Great, thank you. First, I just want to say thanks to the board and particularly to the subcommittee, the hiring subcommittee, for all the work on the hiring process. I also want to really thank Mary Small, our Deputy Executive Officer, who served as the interim executive officer for nearly half a year and put a lot of work in to the Conservancy. And of course, thanks to Sam Shookett for over 20 years of dedication to the Conservancy and great leadership and mentorship to all of us. And also thanks to the Conservancy staff who have, for the past 2 years, dealt with a lot of change between the pandemic and the change in executive officer. And they've shown a lot of resilience and stayed really focused on the Conservancy's mission and on our projects, despite, all of this tumult. And I'm really excited about this opportunity, particularly given the state funding for coastal resilience, for wildfire resilience, for Explore the Coast, and for many other projects and programs of the Coastal Conservancy. It's going to be a very exciting next 3 to 5 years, especially with the coastal resilience funding. With that, I'll turn to the executive officer report items. We have 2 items. The first one is the Coastal Access Project Standards, which is something I've been leading up for the past year or so. So the Coastal Access Project Standards, it's called for in our enabling legislation. These were last adopted in 1983, so they're a little out of date and reference even payphones. We started the update process on the standards over a year ago. Staff reviewed, all of our staff reviewed the drafts, and then we solicited feedback from some key stakeholders, county parks departments, open space districts, some of our Explore the Coast grantees, the Coastal Commission, state parks. And then we continuously revised, brought to the board at the last meeting, and then had a public comment period from September 23rd to November 12th. We received almost 100 comment letters, which I think just goes to show the level of interest in coastal access, which is terrific. About 70% of the comment letters had to do with short-term vacation rentals on the coast, and most of those were requesting inclusion of short-term rentals as one of the types of overnight accommodations in that particular standard within the standards. Other comments included requests for fishing amenities, non-motorized boats, mention of equestrians. There was a letter from BCDC that sent us kind of back to the legislation, which does include San Francisco Bay. And we're going to be more consistent in the future about applying these standards within San Francisco Bay. Really appreciate BCDC's comments and worked to incorporate many of those. And then there were a lot of letters that expressed support for and some minor edits to the standards that are related to tribes, to justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, and to access for people with disabilities. And we made many of those suggested edits. And then finally, there were some comments requesting stronger language around climate change and protecting natural resources. So we took all of these comments into account, went back and edited the standards, and that's what is before you today to consider and potentially adopt. So with that, I could turn it over to Chair Bosco if there are any questions from the board, and then if you want to take a vote on it.
All right, are there any questions or comments by board members?
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Go right ahead, Joe.
All right. First of all, I want to take my opportunity here, Amy, to officially welcome you. I think you are a fabulous choice and a perfect choice to be leading this organization now. And so I want to say thank you to you for all the hard work that you've done, not just over the course of since your appointment, but for so many years that you've been involved with the organization. And then also just a quick thank you to the subcommittee, Brian and Annie, who put together, I think did an excellent job through their exhaustive search for candidates. And so I want to say thank you to them. Let me just address, what I want to do here is I would like for us to discuss and open up a discussion about standard number 9. This is the one that we received a lot of comments about. And I know that there was some issues from a lot of the letters that we received came from Airbnb or from members of the Short-Term Rental Alliance or from even property owners that have short-term rentals and that have been using those for many years, it sounds like. And my only issue and something I'd like to talk about is that I am slightly concerned about the inclusion and the enumeration of short-term rentals in standard number 9. And I will say, I am slightly concerned about the addition of hotels in standard number 9. The reason for that is because while campsites and RV parks and other types of accommodations that allow people access to the coast are very generally and usually low income, the same cannot be said about hotels and short-term rentals. Some short-term rentals, allowing them on the coast would be a great way to provide access for low-income people to enjoy the coast of California. But I don't think anybody would disagree that while there are also low-income options for hotels and short-term rentals, that hotels and short-term rentals do not necessarily, by their definition, include only low-income options. So I don't have an opinion about whether or not short-term rentals are better than hotels or whether or not they should be promoted by the local ordinances. I'm of the view that issue should be something that's going to be decided by the local ordinance or by the local governments themselves in the various areas. It's an issue that's been controversial throughout the state, I know, in various local communities. And I am just somewhat concerned about the appearance, especially to the extent that these standards are used for whatever reason, for whatever amendments might be proposed by local groups or local ordinances or local governments. I'm just somewhat concerned about the perception that we are endorsing specifically short-term rentals or hotel rooms. So I don't frankly, and by the way, none of the categorization of what these short-term or what these accommodations are, whether they're RV parks or tents or campsites or whatever, it's got nothing to do with what they are. It has only to do with whether or not they are low income options. And so I don't see the benefit of enumerating examples of what low income housing would be. I don't see the benefit of providing examples of low income housing being anything, frankly. If it's only something that is triggered by the cost of the accommodation, then I don't feel it's necessary for us to include all the iterations of various types of accommodations. So I just open that up for discussion. I personally, if I were writing these, I think I would eliminate sentence number 2 entirely and base the accommodations entirely on whether or not access to the coast is, or whether or not we are providing a project criteria to increase low-income access to the coast. That should be the sole thing. And I think that enumerating some of the examples of these accommodations might result perhaps in problems in the future, and perhaps misconceptions about what it is that we're voting on today. So I open that up for a general, hopefully general and constructive conversation.
Thank you, Joe. Would anyone else like to comment on this?
Well, I have the same concern, and I guess to the extent I was thinking that if short-term rentals were included, it should be very circumscribed and be very clear that they're low income and affordable short-term rentals. Linda, I had a question in terms of, I thought that the Coastal Commission had some statewide guidance on short-term rentals, and how does the commission deal with it? We should be consistent.
Yeah, at this point, we don't have guidance yet. We've had a lot of discussions before our commission for permits as well as LCPs that have come through. And it continues to be a difficult and challenging topic. So I understand and agree that we should be consistent, but at this point, we don't have anything specific. When I read these the way that Joe just described and his concern, I would agree taking out that whole sentence that talks about the types isn't necessary, because the other two sentences really get at what this particular standard is about, which is providing accommodations that are lower cost. And we don't need to enumerate the kinds of accommodations because it's the price, it's not the type, as you say. So those are my thoughts.
I thank you, Joe, for opening this up. It seems to me too that we run the risk that indiscriminately allowing hotels, Airbnb and whatever, without regard to what they're charging, it diminishes our entire purpose and could easily mislead people to think that we're just sort of some kind of chamber of commerce activity, not that that's bad necessarily, but it really wasn't our intention to guide people to just any accommodation on the coast. It was to cause providers to provide those accommodations and people seeking occupancy on the coast to know that we provided that for them. So I think it diminishes our whole purpose by having that sentence in. So I would join what Linda was suggesting, that we eliminate that sentence. All right.
I didn't want to interrupt any board comments, but sorry, we could definitely move it forward with the with the removal of that second sentence. That is one option, or you could send us back and I could bring this back in February, but it sounds like a pretty simple edit that could allow adoption of the standards now. I would just also add, we have our Explore the Coast Overnight report, and I can send the link out to all the board members for that as well, which goes into greater detail about lower cost overnight accommodations on the coast. It does not touch on short-term rentals, but does touch on hotels and motels, as well as all the other options like cabins and camping and RV parking.
I would just say, I think it sounds like there's some agreement on here. We haven't heard from everybody, but I do want to make clear that a hotel that falls within the financial parameters of low income would certainly qualify. A hotel rate that is $1,000 a night would not. an Airbnb under these parameters, to the extent that it falls within the financial guidelines, it would fall within those financial guidelines. If it's higher priced, it would not. This doesn't exclude anybody, doesn't exclude necessarily anything, and it doesn't include anything. But our task and our goal and our charge under the statute is to provide access to low-income housing. And I'm very concerned that inclusion of these will create confusion about our charge. And as Doug said, and as everybody here said, that it might diminish the impact of what it is we're trying to accomplish. So with that, I would move for the removal of sentence number 2 in bullet number 4 under standard number 9.
And otherwise approve the other part of this
Yeah,
report.
and otherwise approve the entirety of the standards.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Second.
All right, Linda, thank you. All right, any further comment on that?
I would just like to add one more piece to this. When we're talking about lower cost accommodations, our discussion so far has only been around the hotels, motels, and Airbnb. But I do want to make sure that anybody listening here understands that there are instances along the coast where you have yurts and cabins and all sorts of other accommodations that greatly exceed lower cost accommodation prices. So we're not just singling out a hotel or a motel or Airbnb, but any kind of accommodation that greatly exceeds the pricing that would provide lower costs. So it encompasses many of these examples. So we just want to make sure that it's the broad brush. Thank you.
Thank you. Ann, do you want to call the roll, please, on this?
Yes, sir. Ms. Noddle,
Aye.
Ms. Laughlin,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Mr. Alialto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 5A is approved with the edits.
Okay, thank you. And thank you, Joe, for your participation. Amy, you want to continue with your report?
Yes, next up is an update by Trish Chapman on the Hollister Ranch Public Access Program.
And I manage the Conservancy's Central Coast region. Today, I'd like to give you a brief update on the planning for public access at the Hollister Ranch in Santa Barbara County. As you may remember, Hollister Ranch is a 14,000-acre rural residential subdivision and working cattle ranch immediately west of Gaviota State Park. The ranch includes 8.5 miles of coastline and 6 sandy beach areas. Under the provisions of the Coastal Act, the Coastal Commission adopted a Hollister Ranch public access program in 1982 that was to provide access to the shoreline along the Hollister Ranch coastline as one of the requirements for development on the ranch. Under the Coastal Act, the Conservancy is responsible for implementing the program. Ranch owners objected, blocked entry to the ranch necessary to develop the public access, and filed lawsuits. This conflict has continued for 4 decades. Then, in 2019, Governor Newsom signed Assembly Bill 1680, authored by then Assemblymember and now Senator Monique Limon. The bill amended the Coastal Act to direct the Coastal Commission, in consultation with the Conservancy, State Parks, and the State Lands Commission, to develop a contemporary public access program for Hollister Ranch. The bill also grants the coastal agencies the right to enter the property and directs the Conservancy and the State Lands Commission to use their full legal authority to implement the provisions of the program as expeditiously as possible. I'm going to give you a quick synopsis of where we are with this effort and where we are going, and then provide a bit more information about the access program itself. The state agency team has been working together since 2019 to develop the program. A draft access program was released in September, and on November 18th, the Coastal Commission held a workshop on the draft program. Based on the outcomes of the workshop, the access program will be further revised and then brought back to the Commission for approval in 2022. To date, the planning work has been paid for by state parks and the Coastal Conservancy, and there is an item on the consent calendar today to approve additional funding to complete the program. Once the program is approved, the State Lands Commission will be taking the lead on acquiring the additional property rights that are needed, and the full state agency team will be working together to develop a plan for management of the program. Now, a bit about the draft program. AB 1680 requires the new access program to include public involvement, a list of land-based access options, a description of existing conditions and current access, educational opportunities, provisions to protect sensitive resources, a summary of permits needed to implement the program, an implementation strategy, and to provide increased access within 1 year of Coastal Commission approval of the program. The 4 state agencies have been working together for over 2 years on the planning process, which has included extensive public engagement. Initial focused stakeholder meetings were held in late 2019, followed by an in-person public week workshop in Goleta in February 2020, which had 170 participants. After that, due to COVID, we shifted to online meetings and surveys. To get more detailed community input, we also created an 18-member working group comprised of people from various backgrounds and expertise. The working group has been an invaluable sounding board and source of focused information and has connected the state agency team with additional stakeholders such as environmental justice groups, youth, and the tribal community. Based on input from the first set of engagement activities, the state team, working with the working group, established a vision for the program. First, we heard consistently from folks with lots of different opinions about access to Hollister that the coastline at Hollister Ranch offers a unique and high-quality coastal experience. The access program seeks to retain that high-quality experience while making it accessible to the general public. The program proposes a somewhat rugged, rural beach experience that matches the surrounding landscape and does not include a lot of amenities. The program recognizes the great importance of this landscape for the Chumash and recommends a specific component for Chumash cultural access. It also includes specific recommendations to help promote equitable access. Then we developed more detailed program objectives, which include providing safe, equitable, and inclusive access, provide experiences that meet the interests of a broad range of Californians, provide increased access within 1 year of program approval, minimize impacts to coastal resources, including natural habitats, cultural resources, and agricultural operations, and respect private property rights. In September, the state team released the draft Hollister Ranch Coastal Access Program, which is linked as Exhibit 3 in the Hollister Ranch Coastal Access Program consent item on the agenda. I will provide a very brief summary of the key takeaways and components of the access program. One important thing to note is that only the beaches are public property. The road and everything above the mean high tide line are private property. This graphic shows the public versus private property at San Agustin Beach. Only the blue color is public land. The tan color is owned by the Hollister Ranch Owners Association, the red by the railroad, and the green by individual property owners. Therefore, before any of the Hollister Ranch Coastal Access Program can be implemented, the necessary property rights for public access must be acquired from the Ranch Owners Association, individual property owners, and the railroad. The State Lands Commission will be leading the effort to acquire these property rights. A key consideration in developing the access program is the challenges to providing access, and there's a lot of them. First, there's the distance. It's almost 10 miles on the road from Gaviota State Park to the westernmost beach. The road itself is a constraint. It's windy and narrow with blind turns. There is a cattle operation on the ranch that frequently operates on and adjacent to the road. There are a lot of sensitive resources, including natural, cultural, and tribal resources. There are numerous hazards, in particular the railroad and erosive bluffs. The cell phone coverage is spotty at best, and it is a long way for any emergency response. And there's also a lack of water and sewer infrastructure for providing restrooms or drinking water. The Access program contemplates 4 different ways the public could get to the beaches: by shuttle, private car, walking, or biking. Each of these transportation modes is referred to as an access component, and there's also a 5th component specifically for Chumash cultural access, which could utilize any of these travel modes. For each component, the program envisions both guided and independent access options. The guided access can involve any beach activity, such as surfing, beach walking, environmental education, or others. Guides can reduce the safety and environmental risks associated with access to the beach. Each access component was qualitatively assessed for how well it meets the program objectives related to the program design. I won't go into the details today, but the discussion of each can be found in the draft access program. Now I'll talk a bit about implementation of the program, which is divided into 3 phases. The first phase is the preparation phase, where the state agency team will work together on the many tasks needed to actually open the ranch beaches up for public access. I'm only going to highlight some of the bigger ones. I've already mentioned the need to secure additional property rights. We also need to determine who is going to do the day-to-day access management. The Coastal Act says that the State Coastal Conservancy will use its authority to implement the program. But as you know, the Conservancy is not a public access management agency, and we lack the expertise, staff, and resources to operate and manage public access at Hollister. Therefore, the state agency team will need to identify 1 or more organizations to manage the program. This organization is referred to in the document as the managing entity. The managing entity could be a public agency, nonprofit organization, tribe, concessionaire, or a combination of organizations that manages access collaboratively. We need to do a survey of cultural and tribal resources along the beach access points, and that will be undertaken with leadership from interested Chumash tribes. We need to form an advisory committee to provide a continued voice to the community in how the program is carried out. And we'll need to do the planning, environmental review, and permitting for the infrastructure needed for initial access, and then construct that infrastructure. Once the preparation tasks are complete, the pilot phase will start. The pilot phase will focus on testing out various program concepts and refining program management. The pilot phase will have a maximum capacity of 100 people per day, but actual daily capacity will depend on budget, management capacity, and adaptive management of any impacts. The pilot phase will also include design and construction of additional infrastructure as may be needed. This phase will last for 2 years. After the pilot phase, the program will be considered fully operational in the program implementation phase. Limits on daily capacity will be set by the managing entity in consultation with the advisory committee based on demand, management capacity, and management of impacts. The draft program included a maximum potential capacity of 500 people per day, but the coastal commissioners have asked the state team to consider increasing that. So our next steps. At the November 18th Coastal Commission meeting, commissioners asked for a variety of additional information to be added to the access program. The state agency team and its consultants will be working on this over the coming months. As you've heard, there's a lot that has to happen before access can begin. But the state team has been meeting frequently with representatives of Hollister Ranch about the possibility of the ranch voluntarily providing increased access before the state has acquired necessary rights to the road. We are hopeful that the ranch will allow increased guided access to begin by the April 2022 legislative deadline for increased public access. The goals of this early action access would be to provide opportunities for public access now before the state has all the necessary property rights, allow us to test out some of the concepts in the access program and refine those ideas to better meet the program goals, and through that work to build trust and working relationships with ranch owners and management, which will facilitate future implementation of the access program. The early action access will start with guided access led by Chumash representatives. This is to ensure protection of tribal resources until the tribal and cultural resources have been surveyed and protection mechanisms implemented. Other guided access options may become possible over time. I'm available if you have any questions.
I'll just say you've come a long way, and what a difference a state law makes.
Very
It's
true.
encouraging to hear that the property owners are engaged and trying to come up with some ways to increase public access. It sounds like there'll be some significant changes coming from the commission actions as well.
I mean, overall, the commission, what Linda can speak to this too, the commission was fairly supportive of the draft program, but there were some specific things that they wanted expanded on more and additional consideration too. And I will say that while we are working collaboratively with the landowners, there is still a significant divide in belief of how many members of the public should be allowed in.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. This is probably impossible. So if, to the extent that you're, can you summarize just really briefly what the main opposition is? And then I'm curious, are the property owners on board with selling
The property rights that we need? Yeah, okay. I mean, the main opposition, we heard from many different, in many different contexts, not just homeowners, that the property out there and the experience out there is pretty unique for Southern California, and that the, high quality of the resources and just the low number of people was part of that experience, and that people wanted, non-owners wanted access, but they wanted it in a way that didn't lose the uniqueness of that experience. And so the program is really designed around that as one of the big factors. I think that one of the main messages we heard from folks, I think it goes too far, is that the resources are too sensitive and that we won't be able to manage impacts on them. And Linda's also part of the state agency team, so feel free to chime in at any point. And I'm sorry, I forgot the second half of your question.
and are the property owners willing to sell?
Right.
If necessary?
The negotiations have not begun on that. I think there will be at least some reluctance to that.
Let me just add a few other things, and thank you, Trish. That was a great overview. One thing that a lot of people don't understand is that this is a very large residential community. So there's about 1,100 owners. So there's a lot of homeowners to deal with. It's not a typical case where it's just 10 or 20 people. So the future discussions with property rights and acquiring them or buying them it requires a lot of different people to be involved. So of course, we don't know where that'll go until it begins. I just wanted to add a little bit to what Trish said, just for the context for those that did not attend our workshop, the Coastal Commission workshop on November 18th. It was a 6-hour workshop. So we had a great public meeting, in my opinion. We had over 100 speakers. And then the commission spent, and not only do we have 100 speakers, but we had over 650 letters came in, and they're all posted on the Coastal Commission's website. And I would agree with what Trish said, that the commissioners themselves were very supportive of the interagency team's draft program that we took to them. They did want more specifics on implementation. They're very concerned about a cap on the numbers. Worried about or concerned about equity. And they are really asking us at the state agency team that we move forward as soon as we can to get some access opened out there. And I think that probably covers it at this point. Thank you.
Doug, you're muted.
I'm sorry, Linda, could I ask you this? I can see where there's numbers involved, whether you have 100 people allowed per day or 500 people, and that's a balancing act. But the 1,100 residents that live there, are they entitled to travel onto the public property anytime they want? And in other words, is there any limitation on their access?
That's a good question, and that's exactly a question that some of the commissioners brought up, that what at this point in time, those 1,100 owners all can bring on their private guests every day of the year. And the question was, well, when this program is adopted and implemented, how will that affect the homeowners and their guests? And we don't have an answer exactly to that at this point, but that was a question. I would say that the commissioners that were concerned about putting a ceiling on the number of visitors, they felt, or at least some of them felt, like the adaptive management that's a part of the program that will look at public access, the impacts, and then the monitoring, and then the changes needed, that would be a much better way to address the numbers of people, in the sense of making sure the impacts don't occur, or that they're addressed and reshifted as soon as they can, rather than spending time and concentrating on counting the number of people per day that go in, that really didn't get to protecting the resources very effectively.
But do you think that when all is said and done, the owners will get swept into some sort of regime that they now don't have?
I'll answer that. No, I don't think they will, because that would require us buying away property rights from them, because they have the property rights to get to the beach now, and then the beach is public. We're gonna buy the rights so the public can also get to the beach, but to incorporate them under the same limits would require buying away additional rights.
Mhm.
And I don't anticipate that being part of what we attempt.
Well, then it's similar to other situations that we've seen where private parties have a right to the public's beaches that the public don't have a right to get to. Interesting.
That's the way it is right now. And then the idea of the program is to try to get the public to the beach.
Well, it certainly looks like this is very complicated, as it always has been, with the legal issues and everything. I wish you good luck with it, because it's well worth doing. I mean, that's a magnificent stretch of a beach in a good location in California.
And just also to add the urgency of it as well, while the state has funds.
Yes.
Which is,
And they did, there was $10 million in this year's budget for this Hollister access. So.
Wow. $10 million, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So you envision, I guess, trying to get easements on some of the private property and build a few roads over the course of the 10-mile stretch.
We don't need to build roads. There are existing roads, but we need access easements over the existing roads. Yeah.
I see.
And also over the dry sand area of the beach, because you need to drive to the beach, and then there's a portion of the beach that's private, that's above the medium high tide line. We need access over that portion of the beach to the public beach.
And would there be our ancillary construction, like parking lots and that kind of thing?
That's envisioned in the program, yeah. And so that also requires, the right to have this much parking and have a bathroom in a certain location, all that. So the first part of buying the property rights is this very significant challenge.
Right.
It's a hurdle that's going to take us a while to get over.
I'm loath to ask this, but is eminent domain come up at all in the conversations?
Yes, eminent domain is the tool of last resort, but it is a tool. It is one of the options that State Lands Commission has.
Okay.
They'd prefer not to use it, and they'll be negotiating to try not to use it, but it is a possibility.
Okay. Thank you. Very informative.
Yes, thanks, Trish.
Big thanks to Trish for taking this on.
Wish you luck. All right, Amy, go ahead. Is that it for your report?
Yes, and I also want to thank Trish and Linda Laughlin for all the work on this. And that concludes our EO report.
Thank you. All right, we're now going to turn to the project portion of our agenda. And now we're starting with the South Coast, and Sam Jenikis has agenda item number 6. Sam?
Board. My name is Sam Jenikis, and I'll be presenting the Matilaha Dam Ecosystem Restoration Project, Robles Diversion Design, to you today. Staff recommends that the Conservancy authorize disbursement of up to $379,350 to the County of Ventura to conduct planning and to develop design criteria, preliminary design plans, and alternatives refinement for improvements to the Robles Diversion and Fish Passage Facility in unincorporated Ventura County. In June of this year, the county released the Robles Diversion Phase 1 Summary Report. The proposed project will build from that report to refine the criteria used to judge the project alternatives. Preliminary alternative designs will be moved beyond the conceptual first phase to inform the development of draft designs and alternatives analysis reports. And finally, a preferred alternative will be selected for the next phase of design. The Robles Diversion is located on the Ventura River, approximately 14 miles upstream of the Pacific Ocean and 2.3 miles downstream of Matilaha Dam. The Robles Diversion allows Casitas Municipal Water District to divert water from the Ventura River to Lake Casitas under conditions set by National Marine Fisheries Service biological opinion for the endangered Southern California steelhead trout. The diversion facility consists of a temporary dam that collects water and directs it to the diversion canal. That collection area is the water and vegetated area at the top of the slide, with the main river descending to the bottom right of the slide. The diversion canal leaves the collection area, traveling toward the lower left side of this slide. Diverting water from any river complicates fish passage within that river. As such, Robles Diversion also includes a fish passage facility funded in part by the Conservancy in the early 2000s. While the facility does work, it needs to be improved for better function, particularly given the proposed dam removal upstream. The redesign of the Robles Diversion is a key component of the greater Matilaha Dam removal project and is prerequisite to removal of the dam. Sediment and debris get caught behind the Robles Diversion Dam and cause costly maintenance, interrupt fish passage, and frequently stop diversion during storms. The improvement goals for the Robles Diversion are to restore natural sediment transport past the diversion, to maintain or enhance upstream and downstream fish passage, to maintain water diversions and enhance water diversion efficiency, and to reduce downstream flood risk. To achieve these goals, the project team is looking at a range of alternatives that may include changes or improvements to all components of the diversion and fishway. This slide shows the current Matilaha Reservoir and its approximately 9 million cubic yards of trapped sediment. Part of the desired effect of removing Matilaha Dam is connecting sediment back to the ocean, including the sediment trapped behind Matilaha Dam. Improvements at Robles are needed to accommodate the sediment moving through the system without limiting the water district's ability to divert water to Casitas. The project is an opportunity to improve water reliability, improve fish passage, reduce operations and maintenance costs, and facilitate the future removal of Matilaha Dam. The proposed project enjoys broad support, including support from Ventura County Supervisor Matt Levere, Casitas Municipal Water District, Resources Legacy Fund, Ventura Land Trust, California Trout, Surfrider Foundation Matilaha Coalition, Ojai Valley Land Conservancy, Patagonia, and the Ventura River Watershed Council. This project builds on significant prior and current investment by the California Natural Resources Agency, including over $30 million combined from the Wildlife Conservation Board, the Department of Fish and Wildlife, and the Conservancy. Thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sam. Are there any questions for Sam?
Sam, once the project is done, would the next phase be removal of the dam? And will there be further water diversion after the removal of the dam?
So this is a phase in a design project. There will be a further phase in this design project. This is one of multiple different downstream components to the dam removal, the greater project, including some levee improvements and new levees, another bridge replacement that we are funding design for, another bridge replacement that is being implemented right now. So there are still several steps moving forward to dam removal, but we've had a lot of momentum recently. The diversion from the Ventura River to Casitas Reservoir will happen for the foreseen future, like for the foreseeable future. There's the redesign or improvements to Robles diversion are taking that into consideration moving forward.
Hey, Sam, if all goes well, when do we think the dam will come down?
If all goes well, and a lot needs to go well, we've been targeting hopefully around by 2030. With all that we're doing, we're getting close to having, I think the next phase of design for dam removal will take us to 100% design on the dam removal, and that'll be in the next 2 to 3 years. But then we still have to do design work on the levee improvements. We have to finalize this Robles diversion design and implement that. There's so many things that have to happen downstream before the actual dam removal can happen. And as we know, things don't happen quickly.
And when it is removed, it'll be removed by cutting down the scissor line that has been indicated to the right.
Yeah,
that's one of the greatest protest graffitis I've ever seen. I love it.
Yeah, the current design phase is trying to figure out where the other scissor line needs to go.
Well, I think when I first joined the Conservancy board, this was one of the first big exciting projects that we took a field trip to when we used to do field trips, and to think that it's not going to be till 2030 that the dam comes down it is slow. So keep it up.
We will. It is frustratingly slow, but I can assure you that a lot of people are working very hard towards that end goal.
Yeah, and we toured just a few weeks ago, and one of the most inspiring things was to see the actual construction of one of the new bridges, which we had funded design, and Department of Fish and Wildlife is funding construction, and there were 20 or 30 construction workers out there building the new bridge. So it's happening in phases, with a lot of this downstream work needing to occur first, but there is physical progress.
Are there any other board comments? Annie, I do remember when we started with this, and being the optimist that I am, I still hope to see it in my lifetime.
Yes. Well, I'll move approval of this item.
Good. Do we have a second? Oh, wait, I have to ask for, we have a motion and second, but we have to, is
Oh,
there
sorry.
any public comment on this?
There are no raised hands.
All right, good. So Annie moves, and Joe, did you second it? Okay. That we approve item 6. Anne, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Noddle,
Aye.
Ms. Lachlan,
Aye.
Mr. Cash,
Aye.
Mr. Alioto,
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 6 is approved.
Okay, thank you, Sam.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to item 7 that Deborah Ruddick will present.
The State Coastal Conservancy Board. This is Deborah Ruddick, and I will be presenting on the West Coyote Hills acquisition of Neighborhood 3 in the city of Fullerton in Orange County. Staff recommends that the Conservancy Board authorize disbursement of $10,134,450 to the city of Fullerton to complete purchase of the 13.7-acre Neighborhood 3 for open space habitat protection, improved watershed management, and public access. This includes $9,846,720 toward the purchase price and $287,730 toward estimated closing costs. Anticipated funding sources are general fund and Proposition 68 appropriations to the Conservancy, specifically for conservation of the West Coyote Hills. The fair market value is $11,330,000. Estimated closing costs are $339,900. The proposed Conservancy grant and a separate grant to the city from the Rivers and Mountains Conservancy of $1,535,450 will provide the funds needed to complete the transaction. Acquisition of Neighborhood 3 is expected to close no later than December 31st, 2021. The West Coyote Hills is located in the northwest area of Fullerton and North Orange County, outside of the coastal zone. However, protection of the land in perpetuity as open space will protect plants and wildlife and provide water quality benefits in the Coyote Creek subwatershed of the San Gabriel River, with downstream benefits to coastal and marine resources. The area surrounding the West Coyote Hills is a nearly built-out region with a population of more than 2 million residents. Adjacent land uses consist of residential and commercial development, parks, water reservoirs, and open space. The West Coyote Hills is the largest remaining tract of undeveloped land in North Orange County. The city will acquire Neighborhood 3 from Pacific Coast Homes, a subsidiary of Chevron USA, pursuant to the terms of a master plan and vesting tentative tract map approved by the city in 2015 for the entire 510 acres of the West Coyote Hills. Development entitlements allow construction of up to 760 dwelling units, including 60 in Neighborhood 3. The vesting map provides the city an option to purchase land in the eastern portion of the West Coyote Hills for open space, including Neighborhood 3 and Neighborhood 1. The city has chosen to exercise this option and has entered into a single purchase and sale agreement with the seller for both neighborhoods. Several state and federal agencies have approved grant funding for purchase of Neighborhood 1 at a total cost of $6,170,000. Acquisition of Neighborhood 1 also is expected to close by the end of this calendar year. Acquisitions of Neighborhoods 1 and 3 will eliminate all development potential in the eastern West Coyote Hills. In combination with Neighborhood 2, previously acquired by the city, and the city-owned and managed Robert E. Ward Nature Preserve, the purchases will result in the city owning and managing 115 acres of permanently protected contiguous open space. The West Coyote Hills was a major oil field that ceased operation in the late 1970s. Before the property can be used for intended open space purposes, the seller is required by the purchase and sale agreement to complete a cleanup of remaining oil production infrastructure consistent with a remedial action plan approved by the Orange County Health Agency in January 2020. The PSA allows the seller to take 1 year after close of escrow to clean up the property. The RAP proposes excavation and removal activities for locations where soil tests exceeded health screening criteria and background levels of metals and other regulated substances. Some structures on the property are recommended to be left in place because removing them would be likely to damage critical habitat. In spite of the urban context and historical land uses, numerous biological studies and surveys conducted over the last several years report extensive and healthy habitat throughout the West Coyote Hills. More than 350 species of plants and wildlife call the hills home, including the federally threatened California gnatcatcher, state endangered Leisfell's vireo, and the fully protected white-tailed kite. Habitats present in the hills include coastal sage scrub, coast prickly pear, coyote bush, and California sagebrush with elderberry and southern willow scrub. The vesting map obligates the seller to provide 8 miles of recreational trails throughout the West Coyote Hills, with construction timing linked to a development phasing plan. Some of the trail segments will use existing oil pipeline access roads. The trails will connect neighborhoods 1 and 3 and dedicated open space areas with residential neighborhoods and a nature center to be built by the seller at the Ward Nature Preserve. The vesting map requires the seller to provide an endowment of up to $3.84 million plus CPI adjustments for maintenance, repair, and operation of the trail network and the nature center. The vesting map also requires the seller to provide a separate habitat endowment for a third-party habitat agency to manage the open space through a conservation easement approved by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. In summary, staff recommends the proposed grant as a good investment of state resources because 1, it will help protect the last undeveloped urban open space in North Orange County, thereby advancing the governor's 30 by 30 executive order. 2, it will advance state and regional water quality improvement goals. 3, it will help protect state and federal endangered and threatened species. 4, it will help resolve a major land use conflict. And 5, it will support public trail recreation. I'll leave you with this quote from the Coyote Creek Watershed Management Plan. The Coyote Hills serve important watershed as well as habitat functions, both of which can only be further compromised by additional habitat loss and fragmentation. If conserved, Coyote Hills will constitute the most significant natural open space within a vast sea of humanity in the Coyote Creek watershed. If you have any questions, either I or the city's Deputy Parks and Recreation Director, Alice Loya, can answer them now. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Are there any questions for Deborah or Alice Loya?
I had a question. Deborah, is this the last part of the acquisition of the West Coyote Hills?
You are
You're on
muted,
mute.
Deborah.
Yes, the Wildlife Conservation Board approved their share of the $6.1 million for Neighborhood 1 on November 18th. So everybody else has
That's
committed their
excellent.
funds. I'll go into escrow hopefully before the end of the year.
I had
Wow,
a question.
that's great.
I had a question. Just it sounded like provision of access is tied to some of the development sequencing. Can you give us a sense of how soon public access will be available in the area?
Well, in the case of Neighborhood 1, some trail work, I believe, is already ready to proceed. And there will be the construction of the Nature Center on the Ward Preserve. In the case of Neighborhood 3, it's tied to development in adjacent areas, but would only happen, at least currently, when the developer goes to get permits for this development. Now, the vesting tentative map and the agreement with the city gives the city the option to purchase the entire 510 acres. And the Conservancy now has another slug of funding, approximately $28.5 million. And WCB also has some funding where, we might proceed to negotiate for the purchase of other properties. But if in fact more land is purchased, including the land that's connected to the trail network segments in this area, then some new plan would have to come up for trail construction. That's my understanding. But Alice Loya is here and can talk more about that. So maybe Chris would like to move Alice into a panelist role.
I think I'm here already. Thank you,
Okay.
Deborah. Thank you for presenting this, Deborah. And the city of Fullerton is very happy that this long time project is coming to an end now. The trails that are going through the east side, which will be 100% open space, the first section of trails are under construction right now, and that's in the city-owned Robert Ward Nature Preserve. Those should be done at the end of January, so the public will have access to a portion of West Coyote Hills in January, at end of January, beginning of February. There are no trails that are going to be going through Neighborhood 1, but there is a trail that is along the perimeter of Neighborhood 1. This Neighborhood 1 is 100% habitat. So residents and the other public can access that trail in January or February. As Deborah said, the rest of the trail system will be using oil roads that are already there, and they will be constructed in phases before the construction of the first home, which will be only on the west side.
I had a quick question. What is happening with the land that was marked as parcel A on the map? In other words, either side of the Robert Ward property and just below Neighborhood 1 and Neighborhood 3.
So parcels A and B are 100% open space, and the developer seller Chevron was required to make that habitat as part of their remedial action plan. So separate to purchasing neighborhoods 1 and 3 and neighborhood 2 and Robert Ward, those were always slated to be habitat. That will be all incorporated into the conservation easement and the preserve.
Okay, are there any other questions from the board? All right, let's turn to public comment. If you'd like to comment on this item, please raise the hand at the bottom of your screen or *9 on your cell phone. Are there any, Chris, are there any members of the public that want to comment?
There are no public comments.
All right. In that case, who would like to move approval of item 7? Brian moves, and Annie, how about you? You want a second?
Sure, I'll second.
All right. Anne, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Notoff?
Aye.
Ms. Lachlan?
Aye.
Mr. Cash?
Aye.
Mr. Aliotto?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 7 is approved.
Okay, thank you very much, Deborah.
Thank you.
We'll now go on to item 8, which is going to be presented by Sue Corbally.
Of the State Coastal Conservancy. This is Sue Corbally, and I will be presenting the Marin Carbon Farming Project for your consideration. Staff recommends the Conservancy authorize disbursement of $1 million to the Marin Resource Conservation District to develop and implement carbon farming plans on ranches in Marin County. Staff also recommends the Conservancy approve the Mitigated Negative Declaration for the Marin Permit Coordination Program that was adopted by the Marin RCD in 2018. The proposed disbursement for the project will come from Conservancy Prop 68 funds for projects that promote resilience to climate change. These funds are leveraged by $667,000 in secured cash from a variety of sources, including federal and state agencies, local partners, a local voter-approved tax measure, and county funds, and by another $300,000 of in-kind support from the grantee and project partners. The work will occur between January 2022 and December 2025. The project area is located in Marin County on lands that drain to Tamales Bay. The Conservancy has been instrumental in the development of the Marin Carbon Farming Project, and this project builds off prior Conservancy funding. In 2014, the Conservancy authorized funds to the Marin RCD to implement pilot projects on 3 ranches to measure and sequester carbon in soils through the application of aerobically composted ag waste on grazing lands. In 2015, the RCD expanded carbon farm planning in Marin and regionally to Napa, Sonoma, and Mendocino counties to develop 4 carbon farm planning templates for vineyards, orchards, forest lands, and rangelands, complete 20 carbon farm plans for the region, and conduct trainings to promote the program to landowners and partners. In 2017, Conservancy funds enabled Marin RCD to prepare another 10 carbon farm plans for rangelands and implement carbon beneficial conservation practices on 4 additional ranches in West Marin. The total Conservancy funding for these 3 previous efforts is $725,000. This was heavily leveraged by $991,000 in cash, as well as in-kind contributions from the RCD and its partners. These carbon farming practices, developed in cooperation with the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, have been quantified for their potential to sequester carbon. Practices from this list are incorporated into a carbon farm plan that quantifies the difference one farm can make by implementing a suite of carbon beneficial practices on the farm and provides ranchers and farmers with a future vision and a path to increase farm fertility, productivity, and resiliency. Carbon farming also increases water quality and wildlife microhabitats by planting biodiverse riparian corridors, hedgerows, windbreaks, and cover crops that strengthen the ecosystem's resilience to climate change. The project will implement 15 to 20 shovel-ready carbon farming practices across 8 ranches with existing carbon farm plans that were developed with funding from the Wildlife Conservation Board. These project locations are shown on the map on the right of this slide. The project will also complete detailed designs for an additional 15 to 20 carbon farming practices for future implementation on additional ranches and prepare carbon farm plans for 6 newly participating ranches. The map on the left of this slide shows the array of ranches from which these planning efforts will be selected. As you can see by that map, the enrollment in the program is quite high. Demand exceeds the current funding and capacity to undertake projects, and Conservancy funding will enable the RCD to better respond to the demonstrated need for ranch restoration activities that sequester carbon. These photos represent the types of conditions where NRCS carbon practices will be implemented and the practices to be employed at each. These include degraded and eroding riparian corridors, failed culverts, open pastures unshielded from drying winds, and grazing pastures in need of shade relief. The plans and designs to be prepared under this project will draw from the list of practices shown on the previous slide. In addition to the multiple habitat and climate benefits associated with the restoration work, the project is significant in how it will work with disadvantaged communities shown on this map. The Marin County economy includes and employs many people from disadvantaged communities in the area, such as Point Reyes Station in Marin County and urban areas of Santa Rosa and Petaluma in Sonoma County. However, these people often lack opportunities to develop careers in agriculture as ranchers or farmers, or in natural resources conservation. Marin RCD will intentionally engage with these communities to develop hands-on training in climate adaptation programs on agricultural lands to K-12 students, Black, Indigenous, people of color college-age students, and other or underemployed college-age youth who face barriers to employment due to their levels of education. In this way, these groups can gain experience and potential interest in environmental restoration and agriculture. As you can see from the list on this slide, this project has received wide community support from elected officials, the ag community, researchers and scientists, and community-based organizations. This concludes my presentation. Nancy Scolari with the Marin RCD is here and would like to say a few words. Thank you.
All right, Nancy Scolari, are you out there? Oh,
I'm
there you
here.
are. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. Good morning, almost afternoon. My name's Nancy Scolari, and I'm the Executive Director at the Marin RCD. On behalf of the RCD and our participating farmers and ranchers, I want to thank the Conservancy for supporting us on our journey towards climate resiliency. The Conservancy's support to help agriculture realize its climate goals set in far before other greenhouse gas reduction programs. And we're really grateful that you believed in us and in our work. After several years of research with UC Berkeley, the Conservancy was the first agency to support the idea of carbon farming, and you have supported us every step of the way. You helped us develop our very first carbon farm plan, which was the first in the state, and we are now working on our 20th plan with 60 more farmers in waiting. The Conservancy helped us set up our first demonstration project, and today Marin County farmers have completed over 80 carbon farming practices. The program is now built into the Marin County Climate Action Plan, which brings the county and agriculture together to meet Climate Action Plan goals. This effort was then extended to other counties as you helped us work alongside our neighbors in Sonoma, Napa, Mendocino counties, and now dozens more counties in developing their own programs. Today, we're excited to build upon these programmatic efforts by implementing several riparian restoration projects with a robust countywide partnership. 7 agencies and organizations are working together to deliver the program. UC Cooperative Extension will provide rancher-to-rancher carbon farming workshops. We and our Fibershed partners will provide carbon farming field training and education to members of the Conservation Corps North Bay. Point Blue Conservation Science will educate K through 12 students from marginalized communities and bring them out on the ranches for riparian restorations. We will also engage with Point Blue's community college internship program to provide students of color with access to working lands to learn more about the world of carbon farming. And finally, the Marin Agricultural Land Trust will provide cost share for restoration projects, while the County of Marin will help us develop long-term finance strategies to continue this work in the future. This proposal helps us to develop a fair, equitable, and inclusive community-wide effort that implements the most impactful carbon sequestration projects. And we are really excited to begin this new phase of our program. Thank you for supporting us through the years and for giving us the opportunity to lead together in this effort. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Nancy. Are there any board member comments? Joe?
Thank you. Pleasure to hear from you, Nancy, Sue, both of you, excellent job. This is a dynamite program, I love it. Can you give me a sense of what percentage, this is a voluntary program where farmers can or don't have to participate, right? What percentage of the farmers in California would you say participate in carbon farming?
I have no idea what that number would be. I can tell you for Marin County, we have a pretty significant reach. I pretty much put folks in 3 different categories. We have about a third of the folks who are very innovative and progressive, and they sign up right away. And then there's the second batch, and those are the folks that just sort of wait for the innovators to screw up or to be successful in order for them to adopt the practices. And then there's the third batch who just sort of waits and possibly never signs on. But I can tell you that across the state of California, this program itself has expanded to dozens of counties. How many farmers actually signed up to do the work is happening now with the state's Healthy Soils program. So that may be able to tell you a little bit about how popular it is.
And is there, are farmers able to produce any type of crop while implementing carbon farming techniques? Or is it only a technique that you can apply to certain types of farming?
It can be applied to all different land uses, but I would say the types of practices, what we're funding in this program are all like riparian restoration practices, but there are a number of practices that have to deal with, say, compost application onto pastures where cows would be grazing. So that's more production oriented type work, whereas what we're doing here is restorative.
Yeah, so the only reason I bring this up is it's kind of, I'm sorry to say this, it's slightly not related to your project, because your project to me is a no-brainer. But you know, we've talked a little bit about how the Conservancy can get involved in larger scale projects that have a huge impact, not just within particular counties, but throughout the state of California, and as an example for the world. And I'm just going to throw out there, I would love to see something like this passed as a law within California that requires certain practices like these to be implemented by farmers throughout the state. And I don't know if anybody has ever thought about something like that, but looking at your map and the little dots of farms just occurs to me, you know, what if everybody were doing this in the state? I'll just leave my general comments at that, and hopefully it plants a seed somewhere for some future discussion about proposed legislation of some sort.
I think there is a lot of discussion about regenerative, growing discussion about regenerative agriculture and projects like this, as how agriculture can be part of the solution as opposed to part of the problem on climate. And I think that's a good idea. I did have a issue. I know when you first identified where this would be applied, it was on the east side of Tamales Bay, but then you had another map that showed some of the inholdings in the national seashore were potential as well. And I know there's a lot of controversy about the extension of those leases and the wildlife impacts and conflicts between cows and elk. So is this, I don't want to seal in any decisions on those ongoing operations, and make sure that the federal decision makers have leeway to make the decision they need to make there. So can you tell me how this would or would not interact with that debate over the leases in the national seashore?
Yeah, I can tell you that we're working really closely with the seashore. We have a contract, a new contract with the seashore to help them with provide services to the ranchers there. And the park has hesitated in moving forward with that just because of the controversy and the general management plan amendment that has occurred. And they waited for that to be completed before moving forward. And so now we are in contract, and we will be helping those ranches with many of these same practices, which are going to be riparian restoration and, you know, wetland enhancement, hedgerows, but they will be done in concert with the park and with the decisions that were made as part of that whole effort. So this isn't a separate thing. We're going to be doing it together. The projects that are currently slated to be implemented in this program are not falling within that boundary, but it's a plan that we have for the future. Does that answer your question?
I think so. You're basically, the decision has been made already by the Park District.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a couple questions. Are any of these ranches that we're spending the money on, did we already buy easements, conservation easements on those ranches? Because I know in Marin we've done that.
Yeah, you have, and I'd say half of them, probably about half, are under easement. And the others are, you know, they either have not, they just don't have an easement on their ranches. But we work pretty heavily with malt on those projects. So and that's where the malt contribution comes in.
So in effect, about half of these we've already invested in a different form, but. And then secondly, are ranchers that participate in this program, are they required to contribute financially to it on their own properties?
They're required to provide a 25% match to the project. And sometimes we will waive that depending on the type of project and the scale. Right now we have a project, a riparian restoration project. It's costing $400,000 for a half mile of stream. And that's just something that the rancher is going to be able to provide a 25% cost share on. So we try to be able to work with them to make up for most of the cost.
And then I have one other question. You know, agriculture has a lot of things going on right now, one of which is no water. But it also has competing, in terms of climate change and carbon, there's competing things that happen. I mean, one of the slides showed two-headed cattle, and yet we know that cattle are major producers of methane gas. Is there any consideration given when we give out this money to ranchers, is sort of, okay, right here you're doing carbon sequestration stuff, but what are those cattle doing on this property? I mean, are people required to balance out sort of what their net contribution to climate change might be?
They aren't required to, but what we do is that's where our carbon farm plan comes in. So the carbon farm plan will take a holistic look at the entire operation. They'll factor in, you know, cows, greenhouse gas emissions from the dairy, also what's happening in terms of sequestration out on their pastures. And then we'll try to sort of balance out and prescribe practices across the entire ranch. And so, for example, Strauss is one of the dairies that has participated in the program, and so they're not only, you know, creating a plan for their own dairy, but they're expanding that to all of their participating dairies, and so, and going as far as, you know, doing the research for in terms of getting seaweed brought into dairies and cows and their diets, which will reduce significantly the amount of greenhouse gas emissions from them. So they're doing, you know, a lot of the work. It's not just here's a little bit of money to get you going on a practice, but we're really trying to do this very holistically, ranch by ranch, with plans in place.
And then are people required over a period of time to maintain what they've agreed to do? How long a period of time is that?
Well, we have agreements depending on the practice, because sometimes the practice, you know, is an infrastructure type project versus a restoration type project, but they range anywhere from 10 to 25 years. And then Malt will come in and will monitor at least the easement projects in perpetuity.
Okay. All right. Are there any more board questions, comments?
Doug, I would like to respond to or answer one of your questions with regarding to the easements. Yes, the Conservancy contributes to easements in Marin County. I'm not sure that all of the easement protected properties, or even half that are proposed for this project, are Conservancy easements. They may be funded through other sources. There has been discussion in the past about the use of Conservancy protected properties for some of this work, particularly compost. And to my knowledge, a compost application has not occurred on any Conservancy protected properties. And there's reasons for that, but I would just like to clarify that perhaps not 50% of these projects are Conservancy protected properties. And the other comment you made about no water, one of the benefits of this effort is that it actually does improve water retention in soil and organic material so that there is less usage. It restores groundwater. It improves creek flow, which raises groundwater levels. There's a whole, very integrated approach to placement of some of these practices in an effort to improve water storage.
Yeah, thank you, Sue. The point I was making is modern day agriculture is a very complicated pursuit,
Yes.
and it includes all of those things, which this is a part of.
Yes.
All right, why don't we see if there's any member of the public that would like to address the board? If so, Chris, please raise your hand. And if you're on a cell phone, what is it you press on that? 9 and *9. All right, Chris, does anyone want to address us?
There are no public comments.
Okay. In that case, do I have a motion that we approve item 8? Joe moves and
moved.
And who wants to second that? All right, I'm going to choose someone. Brian, go ahead. Brian voluntarily seconded that. All right, Ann, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Nono.
Aye.
Ms. Lachlan.
Aye.
Mr. Cash.
Aye.
Mr. Alioto.
Aye.
Chair Bosco.
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 8 is approved.
Thank you
All
very
right.
much.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Sue and Nancy. Good
Thank
project.
you.
All right, let's go ahead and Sam or Peter Girouche is going to do item 9.
Thank you for the opportunity to present to you the salmonid habitat enhancement in coastal tributaries of the Lower Klamath project. Staff recommends the authorization of up to $300,000 to the Yurok tribe to enhance salmonid habitat in Hunter and McGarvey Creeks, both tributaries to the Lower Klamath River in Delmark County. The proposed project will improve the quality of off-channel and floodplain habitats to provide vital, low-velocity salmonid rearing habitat and boost watershed health to improve conditions for all salmonid life stages. On slide 2, there is a map of McGarvey Creek on the left-hand side, and on the right-hand side is the map of Hunter Creek. The circles indicate the sections of stream that will be addressed by this project. As you can see from the maps, they are both tributaries to the lower part of the Klamath River, where the river is still tidally influenced. Historic and ongoing management of Lower Klamath tributaries has drastically decreased native fish habitat and watershed resiliency. Riparian conifers have been removed, in-stream wood was removed, sedimentation has increased, and the hydrology has been altered due to both the timber harvest and the construction of extensive road networks. Klamath River salmonid populations are in serious decline, with the Klamath River coho as listed threatened under the Endangered Species Act. On slide 3 is a detailed map of the stretch of Hunter Creek where the work will take place. In Hunter Creek, the project will reconnect the stream to its floodplain by relocating an approximately 1,600-foot stretch of road and the removal of a berm that was created to protect the road. The road will be moved out of the floodplain so that the stream has more room during high flows. In addition, the project will increase habitat complexity with constructed wood jams and beaver dam analogs. On slide 4 is a detailed map of the stretch of McGarvey Creek where the work will take place. In McGarvey Creek, the goal is to increase habitat complexity for salmonids, again with constructed wood jams and beaver dam analogs. In addition, the stream will be reconnected to its floodplain. Both of these actions are critical during winter as they provide a slow water refuge during high flows. In the summer, fish benefit from the cover of wood in the stream and from the pools that often appear downstream of the wood jams. The Yurok tribe has already been doing restoration work elsewhere in McGarvey and Hunter Creeks and have shared with us some of the photos of the type of work that this grant would support. Slide 5 is the photograph of a newly finished constructed wood jam on Hunter Creek. Slide 6 is the same location during high flows in the winter. Slide 7 shows it at a slightly lower water level. You can see how the stream is shifting towards the right and that the constructed wood jam has started to recruit native wood. On slide 8, the flows have dropped further and the wood jam has grown even larger. This is a great example of how these structures can start a natural process, which then can continue without further intervention. Slide 9 is a beaver dam analog on McGarvey Creek. It is nearly hidden by the trees that cross over the creek. Slide 10 has a close-up of another beaver dam analog on McGarvey Creek. You can see how the willows and other branches were woven together between the posts. The metal is just temporarily in place to help with project monitoring. As you can see from these photos, the Yurok Tribal Fisheries Department has a great deal of experience with this type of fish habitat restoration. The funding for this project comes from the violation remediation account and is due to a settlement between Caltrans and the California Coastal Commission. That settlement agreement specifically requires that the funding go to the Yurok tribe for fisheries restoration work. Thank you for your consideration of this project, and I am now available for any questions.
Thank you, Peter. Are there any questions from the board? All right, if not, are there any comments from the public? Chris, do we have anyone that wants to speak on this subject? Hello?
No, we have no public comment, sir.
Oh, all right. Well, Peter, thank you. Looks like a good project. So let's end. First of all, I need a motion and second.
I'd like to move past item number 9.
All
I'll
right.
second.
Joe moves and Ann seconds that we approve item 9. Ann, will you please call the roll?
Yes, sir. Ms. Noddle?
Aye.
Ms. Laughlin?
Aye.
Mr. Cash?
Aye.
Mr. Alioto?
Aye.
Chair Bosco?
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 9 is approved.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Let's go on now to our last regular agenda item, which is on the Central Coast and will be presented by Tim Duff.
Staff recommends the Conservancy authorize a grant of up to $300,000 to the County of San Luis Obispo to renovate the Veterans Hall in the town of Cayucas and to construct public access improvements. Cayucas is located above Morro Bay on the northern San Luis Obispo County coast. This slide shows in the black hatched circle at the foot of the pier the site of the Veterans Hall above Cayucas State Beach. This slide shows the hall in more detail with the adjacent parking and picnic area north of the pier. Constructed 145 years ago at the foot of the Cayucas Pier and above Cayucas State Beach, the Vets Hall has long been an important community facility and central to the history and economy of the town. Unfortunately, the hall was shuttered in 2016 due to its unsafe condition and remains closed today. For decades, the community center hosted events throughout the year, including art festivals and holiday celebrations. And the center has been an essential asset to the visitor-serving economic life of Cayucas, bringing thousands of tourists to town annually from all over the region and beyond. This slide shows the existing deteriorated condition of the hall with a structure fronting it on the beach that will be removed and replaced with the public access decking and beach access way, which I'll describe next. Staff is recommending funding for the proposed project given the public access improvements that will link the facility to the Cayucas Pier and adjacent State Beach. Improvements to the public plaza between the hall and the foot of the pier will include a new pedestrian connection between the restored facility's new oceanfront deck and pier. An accessible ramp connecting the building to the beach will be constructed with accessible parking installed to serve visitors to the building and beach. This slide shows the existing pier in the foreground with the renovated Vets Hall and public access decking fronting it, as well as the public plaza at the foot of the pier at the entrance to the hall. This slide shows the renovated hall looking south towards the pier in the background with the public access stairway down to the beach. In addition to the public access amenities, interpretive panels will also be installed to educate the public about the rich tribal history of the town. In addition, the county will be facilitating outreach with local tribes to get additional ideas on opportunities for educating the public about the tribe's rich history in the region, including the town of Cayucas. This slide shows an aerial image of the proposed improvements with the pier in the right-hand corner, the plaza at the foot of the pier at the entry to the hall, and with the extensive public decking fronting the building, including the accessible ramp to the beach. The proposed renovation of the hall entails structurally stabilizing the building with new framing and a new foundation designed to accommodate projected sea level rise over the next 100 years. This will be accomplished by raising the finished floor of the hall and the decking to upwards of 2.5 feet to match the level of the recently restored pier. That pier, by the way, was restored with substantial funding from both the Coastal Conservancy and the Wildlife Conservation Board. The project is supported by local community groups and elected officials at the state, local, and federal level. In addition to the proposed Conservancy grant, the Resources Agency has awarded a $1.9 million grant, and the local community has raised over $250,000. The county will be providing the balance of funds needed to complete the project that are not provided by outside grants. Once completed, the County Parks Department will operate the facility as a unit of their county park system. That concludes staff's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
I just had a comment. I think it'd be fun to have our Central Coast meeting there once it's done. Looks like a great location.
Yeah, it's really nice to see, combining the goals of historic preservation and public access. It's a nice project, both.
All right, if there are no further board comments, are there any comments from the public?
Oh, Kara Woodruff wanted to speak.
Oh, good. Kara, go ahead.
Thank you. Great presentation, Tim. I just wanted to mention this project is within Senator Laird's district in San Luis Obispo County, and he had submitted a letter of support for it. It's a really great project. This truly is the heart of Cayucas, a very quaint beachside community. And in fact, it has historical importance to the Coastal Conservancy as well. Over 20 years ago, this was one of the major stops in securing funding to protect the Hearst Ranch, the $83,000 Hearst Ranch. And in fact, many Coastal Conservancy staff members were present at the Cayucas Vets Hall for that meeting. I was there as well. So it's just a great project for the town and the Central Coast, and Senator Laird is in strong support. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. All right, Chris, are there any members of the public that wish to address the board?
There are no public comments.
All right, then do we have a motion and second to approve item 10? Mr. Cash moves. And Mr. Alioto, would you like to second it? Okay.
Second.
So Ann, will you call the roll on item 10, please?
Yes, sir. Ms. Notoff?
Aye.
Ms. Lachlan?
Aye.
Mr. Cash?
Aye.
Mr. Alioto? I think that's an aye.
Yes, aye.
Sorry. Chair Roscoe?
Aye.
This motion passes. Agenda number 10 is approved.
Okay, thanks a lot, Tim.
Thank you, Chairman.
All right, that concludes our regular agenda items. We'll now go on to public comment on non-agenda items. This is a chance for anyone to speak to the board on items that we didn't have on our agenda. Is there anyone out there that would like to do that?
We have 3 raised hands.
All right.
For now. We're going to start with Walter Lamb.
All right. Mr. Lamb, do you want to go ahead? Walter Lamb.
Yeah, hey, sorry, it takes a little while to get in as a panelist. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen if that's okay. Oh,
Go ahead.
Is that going to be possible?
We can see you, so.
Yeah, no, sorry, I was going to share my screen. I had spoken to staff beforehand.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, go
Let me
ahead.
start
You
to see
can
if
share now.
that's- Okay, great. Thank you. Thanks. I want to just start actually with, yeah, so thank you, Walter Lamb, representing the Bino Wetlands Land Trust. Appreciate your time today. Today, exactly 17 years ago today, December 2nd, 2004, if you can see my screen, was when you approved the first $750,000 for the Bino Wetlands Restoration Project. And throughout that document, there are numerous, I think 9 different references to public access and how important public access is. And of course, we've heard through all today, a huge emphasis on public access for all these projects. But here we are, exactly 17 years later, the money that you appropriated in May, one of the under urgency, it said the need for additional, highlight this, the need for additional public access to natural areas is urgent, especially in park core areas such as neighbors surrounding the Bino Reserve. The reason we keep coming back is this is important to us, not just from a talking about it standpoint, as someone who has brought students to the Bino Wetlands. Our organization wants to do it. We actually want for there to be this access. And so I think there's just an accountability question here that people have gotten comfortable just talking about these things at Biona and not following up. And Chair Bosco, only because you've referenced in the past your role in nominating candidates for the service academies. I incidentally graduated from the U.S. Military Academy at West Point in an earlier time of my life. It was an institution with a lot of flaws and blind spots in hindsight. But one thing I did learn there that served me well is this idea of accountability, that if you say you're going to do something and you don't do it, that's the recipe for a failed project. That's the recipe for not meeting the goals that you claim to care about. And so I'm just going to ask, if you care about access, please don't let comments from May 27th be the end of the story and follow up, because there's more that you can do. I don't believe that the contract with Fish and Wildlife has been finalized yet, and you could easily make that a condition of this funding that you've given, just as you've talked about with other projects today. And the last thing I'll say is on sea level rise, that's personal to me, and I think to a lot of people. Sea level rise, greenhouse gas emissions. And so there's a science behind that, and that science is articulated in a scientific document, which is the final EIR. It's not a perfect document, but it makes very clear what the net greenhouse gas emissions and the impact of sea level rise, and it's not good. And so just to spin it a certain way is just not acceptable to people who are—
That is 2 minutes.
Oh, okay, thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Well, thank you for your comments too. All right, Chris, can we have the next speaker?
Yeah, that's hold on. Marcia Hanscom.
All right, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. Honorable governing board members, Marcia Hanscom with the Sierra Club. And first I want to welcome Amy Hutzel and to say congratulations for your new position in leading the State Coastal Conservancy. I've been saying for a long time we needed a woman heading up this agency. So great to have you here. I sincerely hope that you might take a new look at some of the projects that have been funded by this conservancy, especially those where there is significant controversy. I've had a lengthy history with getting to know the officers of this conservancy, starting in about 1994 when I met with Reed Holderman, then with the conservancy, who told me at a cafe in Sunset Beach in Orange County that there was no way the state would ever purchase land in Southern California because it was just too expensive. Fortunately, I and others didn't take his word as final on that, and we organized the communities in Southern California. And not only did the Bolsa Chica wetlands, which was the subject of my inquiry at the time, get acquired, but later Mr. Holderman, when he worked at Trust for Public Land, helped us to acquire more than 600 acres of land on the Los Angeles coast, now called the Biona Wetlands Ecological Reserve. In 2000, Proposition 12 was passed after a long time of there being no funding for public land acquisition. And in fact, former Executive Officer Michael Fisher told me in his office in about 1997 that he thought the Conservancy might need to close its doors because funding for the Conservancy did not come from the general fund budget and bond money was almost gone. So your Conservancy has been in the midst of spending the last of $15 million that was specified for Baiona as a result of the work we had done with then Assembly Speaker Antonio Villaraigosa, Senator Tom Hayden, and Assembly Member Fred Keeley. Many of the organizations that led the efforts to get that funding approved have not been happy with what the Coastal Conservancy has spent the money on. And until this controversy arose, public money has never
That's
been
2 minutes, Ms. Hanscom.
Okay, I guess we'll get to talk with you later about the rest.
All right, thank you. Chris, is there another comment?
Okay, next speaker is James Garrett.
Garrett, are you out there?
Garrett's not here, but his computer is. This is Patricia McPherson, Grassroots Coalition. So thank you. Per Marcia's last comment, the Department of Finance also was not well pleased with how money has been spent with regard to Baiona wetlands and other areas. In particular, applications that were non-existent for monies given over to a private business, namely the foundation, the Bay Foundation. But Chair Boschko stated his implicit trust in Director Bonham, and I would ask that all board members take an independent look at the science and data regarding Baiona. And I'd like to remind you that Director Bonham was in violation of the California Coastal Act since 2004 for 20 years of unpermitted drainage of fresh water from Baiona, as written by the California Coastal Commission. The director failed to be responsive to multiple letters from the commission attempting to seal the unpermitted drainage until Grassroots Coalition litigation won and brought the issues back to the Coastal Commission for enforcement, and the drains were sealed. The areas have since ponded with rain that CDFW said would never occur, and pickleweed growth has flourished within that area for the endangered Belding Savannah sparrow. CDFW is also a board member of the private Playa Vista business Baiona Wetlands Conservancy, which oversees the pumping, diversion, and throwaway of the groundwater from under Playa Vista into the sanitary sewer or the ocean. This has to cease to occur. Director Bonin told you extraordinary measures are needed to restore Baiona's fresh water to Baiona. This is a false statement. Simply allow and ensure that the pumped and diverted fresh water stay in Baiona to overflow the freshwater marsh system as originally designated to restore Baiona. And I ask that you look at the data that contradicts Mary Small's misinformation to the board. She claimed that up to 20 feet of fill were dumped onto Baiona that must be removed.
That is 2 minutes, Ms. McPherson.
That is without any data support whatsoever. We have provided the.
Okay, Chris, are there other speakers?
Yeah, next speaker is Kathy Knight.
All right. Go ahead, Ms. Knight.
Yes, hello. My name is Kathy Knight. I'm with the Baiona Ecosystem Education Project, which has worked for volunteered with hardly any outside funding for 30 years to save the Baiona wetlands ecosystem. And we are asking you to please not give any money out at this point for Baiona until there's some agreement among the groups that are working to save it, because there's some issues that could really damage the ecosystem. California Department of Fish and Wildlife, their modeling demonstrates the destruction that would occur through their plan by 2030. The unique salt pans and endangered Belding Savannah sparrow pickleweed habitat will be destroyed, becoming mudflats. No land management plan has been done with a hydrology analysis. And this is really important because there's freshwater drinking aquifers beneath Baiona. And, you know, by allowing salt water to come in, which is the current proposed so-called non-restoration plan, we call it, the salt water could damage those drinking water aquifers. And we're in a crisis right now. We're in a crisis with water. We need to protect all of our drinking water aquifers, and that should be a #1 priority. So we urge you not to give out any more money right now to Baiona until these issues have been addressed. Thank you very much. But we do support for public access. That would not damage anything. Money for public access. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, do we have any other speakers?
Yeah, next speaker is Gabrielle Crow.
Can you tell me how many people are in line to speak?
We have one more after Gabrielle.
All right, go ahead, Gabrielle.
Good afternoon, Honorable Governing Board. My name is Gabrielle Crow. I'm actually coming to you from Kumeyaay land. I am a tribal council member for the Gabrielino Shoshone tribe. My grandparents were Vera and Manuel Rocha, who did a lot of work to preserve the Baiona wetlands a long time ago. This is one of the main reasons why I became an environmental educator. I've been one for at least the last 15 years. And I'm here this afternoon because I think that the best way for the general public to learn about the environment is to actually get fully immersed in it. And this is why it's crucial for public access to actually take place now, not waiting for the project to finish, but to actually have access to what's there at Baiona now. It could be, I find it very frustrating as an Indigenous person myself that I don't even have access to the land as it is. But I know that we can work together. And I think that my hope is that for the Conservancy to actually have more tribal representation. As the first stewards of this land, we are actually the best resource for conservation and care for the Baiona wetlands. So I think that if public access as well as tribal involvement is increased, then I think that we'll have some great things happening at the Baiona wetlands. Thank you.
Thank you. Chris, can we have the next speaker, please?
Yeah, next speaker is Leslie Purcell, who's coming over right now. Go ahead, Leslie.
Leslie, are you out there?
Sorry, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So I'm here and work in the preserving of the Baiona wetlands for many years. And I would like to support what people have been saying, both as to access. Years ago, we used to be able to go out with the Baiona Wetlands Land Trust and do some careful cleanups and also abatement of some of the weeds that were taking over. And I would like to see if that's a possibility that some community members could be involved with some of the nonprofits under.
Hello? Leslie, I think you were interrupted.
This is a poor connection.
Oh.
Sorry. I'd also like to support Gabrielle said about involving the tribal members more on a regular basis and having more access for both community members, schools, and for the tribal people. Last point in regards to sea level rise and the current proposal, which would involve bringing in more seawater, and that is not an optimal solution to what historically has been freshwater and also brackish mix. In view of the climate changes that we have going on, more sea level or more saltwater intrusion is not something that we think is a good idea. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Chris, are there any other members of the public that want to speak?
There are no more speakers.
All right. We'll come back then to Conservancy member comments. Do we have any comments from our board members? Yes, Joe.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't remember the exact date of when we discussed Bayona with the director, but I do remember talking about access, and I do remember talking about the participation of tribal representatives. And I thought that we discussed, and I thought that there was some agreement. And I know that we don't have necessarily the authority, if I understand correctly, to require some of that. My understanding was that there was going to be at least an effort on the director's part to allow for, or at least reach out to the tribal members for greater participation. And then also there was discussion, if I recall, about a chain crossing over a particular path. There was a reason for why that path was closed. We discussed whether or not the director might be able to look into providing access. I don't know if he did and then did not do it. I did not hear from any of the comments exactly what the problem was, but I just would, I mean, this seems to me that if folks want to walk around that area and if it is safe for them to do so, and if it's not prohibitive, I thought we talked about this with the director a couple of months ago. I don't really know what the procedure is for doing this, but I would propose that we as a conservancy, as a board, would at least ask the director to increase the participation with tribal representative. Ms. Crow has been talking to us about this for a long time now, and to provide access to these folks to the area to the extent that the director is able to do that within legal limits and within safety, and to the extent that it's safe to do so, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know how we do that. I don't know if I need to make a motion to write a letter to Director Bonham, or if we can just do that in a more informal manner. But that is my view about how some of those issues should be addressed. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Along the lines of what Walter Lamb said when he addressed us a little while ago, to kind of stick with our promises, I think follow up on this would be very appropriate. Maybe our new executive officer could compose a letter to that effect and point out that at this meeting, the board wanted to follow up on those issues. I think that's very appropriate. Is there anyone that doesn't think we should do that? All right, well, is that all right with you, Amy?
Yes, we will follow up with Director Bonham and Department of Fish and Wildlife.
Good. Are there any other?
Yeah, just real fast. Thank you, Amy, and thank you, Mr. Chair, and also thank you to the comments about keeping us abreast of some of those issues.
Yeah. All right, I see our council has arrived in full view. Amy, do we have to have a closed session?
We do not. We don't need a closed session today.
All right, good, thank you. Our next meeting will be February 3rd, 2022. And that will be in Southern California, and we may be able to do it in person if the pandemic doesn't rear up again and prevent that. Again, I want to wish you all very happy holidays. You're a great group of people to work with, and we're still going to be starting out this next year very well, I think. So with that, the meeting is adjourned.
Thank
Happy
you.
holidays, everyone.
Take care.
Happy New Year.
Happy holidays.
Everybody. Yeah.